1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff, we have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
A war rages. A war that could put the United States ahead of the world. The space race. Sputnik was discovered as a Soviet Union satellite and boosted the world into the space field. The United States accepted the challenge of putting the first person on the moon. Questions began to circulate. Would we create a new agency? Would it be a military, science, or civilian program? Should the program have the power to make international agreements? Many different organizations were created to decide on how to proceed. The House created the Select Committee on Astronautics and Space Exploration on March 5, 1958, headed by Majority Leader John W. McCormack. On the Senate Special Committee on Space and Aeronautics, with Senator Johnston as chairman, was created. President Eisenhower had his science advisor James R. Killian, Jr. assemble another committee called the Presidential Science Advisory Committee, PSAC. By March 5th, Eisenhower had approved and signed with Nelson Rockefeller, chairman of PSAC, to make an organization based around their National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which would be a civilian space agency. Debating began, and on April 2nd, Eisenhower sent Congress a draft of legislation that established the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, later named the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. Keith Glennon became the first administrator of NASA, and NASA officially opened on October 1st, 1958. President John F. Kennedy assigned 3 space programs to execute the mission of landing upon the moon. Kennedy had a small direct interest in the space programs of the United States. As stated by John M. Langston, the Soviet Union's non-military accomplishments in space, therefore, forced Kennedy to respond and to serve notice that the U.S. was every bit as capable in the space arena as the Soviets. Of course, to prove this fact, Kennedy had to be willing to commit national resources to NASA and the civilian space program.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
President John F. Kennedy made the bold public claim that the U.S. would land a man on the moon by the end of the decade. His prediction came true on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong of NASA's Apollo 11 mission became the first man to set foot on the moon, effectively winning the space race for the Americans. U.S. astronauts became to be seen as the ultimate American heroes, and Earthbound men and women seemed to enjoy living vicariously through them. Soviets, in turn, were pictured as the ultimate villains, with their massive, relentless efforts to surpass America and prove the power of the communist system.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Mercury space program was the first instance of sending American men into space. Humans, for the first time, were propelled into Earth's low orbit. Alan B. Shepard and John Glenn were just 2 of our space pioneers. Shepard flew in the Freedom 7 and spent all of 15 minutes outside of Earth's atmosphere. He was charged with manning the controls, which involved a lot of button pressing and little time to press them. The few precious moments he had in the ship didn't involve much stargazing.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, lift off and the clock is started. Yes, sir, reading you loud and clear.
With Shepard's first test flight out of the way, the lifestyle part of the ride was ready to be tested. John Glenn, Mercury's 3rd astronaut, landed in Earth's low orbit and stayed long enough to circle the Earth 3 times. The voice of Alan B. Shepard would stay on the line with him for the duration of the flight. During Glenn's orbit, sensors indicated that the Freedom 7's heat shield had come loose. Were it to fall off, Glenn would have burnt to a crisp in the thermosphere. The only thing keeping it intact was the landing bag. Without Glenn even knowing it, he was in a lot of danger. His only choice was not to deploy the landing bag. Despite this danger, he returned to Earth safely after his 3rd orbit. He survived one of NASA's potentially damaging flights. The Gemini space program was the bridge between the Mercury and Apollo programs. The main goals of the Gemini space program were to put man and equipment in space for up to 2 weeks, to rendezvous and dock with orbiting vehicles as well as maneuver a docked ship with a propulsion system, and to perfect methods for landing. All of the goals were met except the landing. The Gemini program provided many of the technological advances that were used in the Apollo missions. One of the advances was the use of proton exchange membrane fuel cells. The use of these cells helped in providing energy sources that had a low temperature, below 100 degrees Celsius, and created specific power and density that was greater than any other type of fuel cells. This cell did not turn brittle like others and were used in high-density power situations. This was used as an important power source that was used in ships. Extravehicular activity was another advancement that the Gemini space program succeeded in. Being able to maneuver around the ship was used in many situations, such as fixing the ship. A tether was used to hold the astronaut to the ship, as well as an umbilical cord to provide oxygen. Edward White II was the first astronaut to walk in space and would lead to later spacewalks and eventually moonwalks. Docking was also one of the main goals of the Gemini program. Gemini 6 and 7 made huge steps towards docking as they rendezvoused within 1 foot of each other. Gemini 8 successfully rendezvoused with the Agena booster and helped encourage further rendezvous. All of these elements helped push towards the Apollo missions.
Okay. At the foot of the ladder, the lamb footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches, although the surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. Ground mass is very fine. And then a long one.
The primary objective of Apollo 11 was to complete a national goal set by President John F. Kennedy on May 25th, perform a crewed lunar landing and return to Earth. On July 20th, 1969, the human race accomplished its single greatest technological achievement of all time, when a human first set foot on another celestial body.
There you go. Okay, now I think I'll do the same. For those who haven't read the plaque, we'll read the plaque that's on the front landing gear of this lamb. There's 2 hemispheres, one showing each of the 2 hemispheres of Earth. Underneath it says, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. It came in peace." I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene. That's all right, I don't mind a bit. How is the quality of the TV? Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. It really is. Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent? Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the... Hippity-hoppity, hippity-hoppity, hippity-hopping over hill and dale. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da. Hippity-hopping along.
Nowadays, NASA has very different goals. Exploration is not the only effort now. The International Space Station is now putting together a program to colonize Mars, known as Mars 1. About 200,000 people applied, and over 600 finalists remain to be handpicked to join the colony. The winners will be provided a one-way ticket to the planet. It is a costly trip, and colonists will not return to Earth. This just goes to show how far NASA has come from the beginning steps of the whole program.